Hey everyone, and welcome back to Planet Coaster. We have a bit of a larger build, as always it seems as of late, and it is going to be a ride skin for this Log Flume that we are going to be initially laying out here. And I have not built a Log Flume yet in this game, so it was a little bit different than what I'm kind of used to at this point, but it was a great experience trying to get this thing laid out in an interesting way. And initially, what you're going to go through is a small upper hill that kind of wraps around and goes underneath itself. And from there, you kind of meander across what I designate kind of a lake area, and then go up the larger hill, go down the main final splash into the splash pool, and then that's it. So you can see it's just kind of this nice singular loop. We do mess with a couple of switchbacks here afterwards just to make it a little bit more interesting and to allow us to attach a little bit more scenery and just change the overall shape. Here is the first little rendition of the sawmill, because it's kind of more of a classic Log Flume ride for me. It's going to be themed more towards, say, being in the Alps or something like that. And it is going to be having a little bit of a special feature on top of the main hill that we'll kind of discuss a little bit later, but based on the title, or if you guys skip ahead to the end, which I'm sure you guys do, it's going to be a more sculptural element. So this initial one, we're going to have this kind of balcony going out, and it's kind of more traditional, almost like a barn-like style here for the sawmill. So I do widen out one side and just to make it a little bit more asymmetrical, because you want to be detailed enough to hold its own, but also to be unique enough to not be just standard. And having a clear story upper way is pretty much an interesting barn style. We do that a lot in, say, Minecraft when I was building in there, and it's just an easy way to add a little bit of detail in a roofline break and to throw, just something different. The pathing here, I was testing out different ways to get the pathing to wrap around and to interact, and you want to establish your pathing kind of early so that you can go ahead and plan the decoration around that. Initially, maybe having a bridge over the Log Flume exit and entryway, but I figured that was just too cluttered, too close together, and so what we end up doing is just making a little bit of a winding path there just to the north. And we are using the thinnest queue line here just so that it is using as little area as possible, and that's just to keep the block count low. And we will be working on a whole bunch of stonework, and this is where all of our part count mainly is from. In fact, the build was a little bit larger than what I had hoped, and because of that, it's going to be divided up into two workshop items to combine later on. Luckily, the first workshop item is actually most of the Log Flume ride and the mountainscape that it goes up. And my tips for making mountains and things like that is you want to start with the spines and get the kind of the roots of the mountains to work. The way I see mountain ranges and things like that are almost like tree roots. So you're going to have these high peaks, and then they're going to spread out and branch out as you get lower. And that's going to create kind of ridge lines. It's going to create more interesting developments than just having a classic volcano shape kind of ridge. You're also going to be able to put in little flat spots with some greenery elements, and you can throw in some trees. And since it is to represent kind of a higher ground, I'm going to try and keep everything evergreen in style, because you're not going to get very broad-leaved trees growing on higher altitudes. They just don't really do well in the shorter summers or the colder climate, because the broad leaf of those trees requires more energy to maintain that. They do gather more energy, but they also have to store energy throughout the winter, and that's why they drop all their leaves. Evergreens, on the other hand, they actually keep their leaves year round, but they also store and gather less energy because of that. So there's kind of this trade-off between those two tree types, and so that's why you see some more evergreens up in the mountains and things like that. And we will be skipping around because obviously placing all these rocks is a very time-consuming task, and there's not much for me to talk about when I'm doing this beyond just saying, hey, there's more rocks being placed, more shrubs, more trees. Now this overhang here, what I imagine is there was this little valley carved out, and I want to get a little bit of a small wooden bridge frame going around the Log Flume ride itself. That way it blends in with the landscape a little bit better. It makes a little bit more sense with how this thing is set up. The upside down stairs here are my main supports, and just trying to use different block combinations than normal to get something a little bit more unique and something a little bit more rustic than what I have done up to this point in my build series or any of my parks so far. Custom bridging can be pretty hard to do, especially around rides. We can't really clip them through the rides. I kind of wish we had that element in there, but that's just something you had to deal with currently in Planet Coaster. I know it's been requested on the forums to allow some clipping into the rides and things like that, and let us figure out how to get that to line up as perfectly as we want, and that would be a very powerful tool at our disposal. So more rock placement going on at this point, and I'm establishing kind of these flat rock lines and then also the ridge lines as we go up and hug more of the flume itself, having some vertical elements mixed in with the gentle slopes to just break up the surface and make it more interesting. We are going to add partially covered sections just for interest as well. It's not really going to look like 100% a realistic place, but I'm okay with that. It is a theme park item after all, so it's fine for it to be a little campy and a little, non-believable in certain areas. And you can even do different ridge line elements, so I'm just establishing the kind of front for these and then building vertical walls. That's actually a technique that we did a little bit in Men of War when we were working on our Japanese map before the park kind of failed on us on that build, so we had to abandon it. Here, just checking the prop count and making sure that we're on a decent schedule to get this thing at least partially finished. Now, you'll notice if you guys do go to the workshop and place this item down, there are elements where there are less rocks, and that's simply to allow placement to take place and also to cut down on the part count, because obviously if you're going to be doing a realistic mountainside, you shouldn't be using all these boulders and all these individual pieces. It's very inefficient and it's very time consuming. You could actually just use the terrain tool for a lot of this and then just throw these rocks as more highlight pieces. But to keep this a blueprint, what we have to do is actually craft it all out of these rocks, because you can't really save the terrain, and that's just a limitation to the blueprint system that I don't think that could ever be fixed. It's kind of a shame. Going back and skipping ahead a little ways, I went ahead and stripped out the initial sawmill and put in something a little bit more with animation and working parts, and we're going to change the layout here to something a little bit more interesting, and this is just to break up the surface and to give us some actual depth and some more story elements involved with the actual structure itself. Though it is a little bit of a tight fit here, we do have a log chute going up into the animated saw blades and things like that. I'm using some of the gears, some of the more steampunk elements to kind of make that sell a little bit better. And then at this point, the mountain is crafted. We have trees, we have elements going along there. I'm saving this as the first blueprint. In fact, you could just drop this down in your park. It would actually work out probably pretty well for you. But now we need to go in and sculpt what's at top of the mountain. And this is going to be Eagle Peak. And if I'm going to call it Eagle Peak, I'm going to need a bird. And the bird is going to be the sculpted element using a lot of these planar pieces that were added upon release. So what I'm going to do is just do a profile of an eagle here. Very quick and pretty rough. You know, just trying to get the base head shape down, and then the width and length. Now it's going to be kind of a fatter bird, but I think I'm pretty okay with that. If you guys are a little bit familiar with World of Warcraft, the hinterlands actually features a griffin on a peak. And so that's kind of, since we built the cathedral last episode, that's kind of my inspiration a little bit here. But I'm not basing it off of that beyond just the idea of a bird on top of a mountain. This is actually going to be a bald eagle, so we're going to be using black tiles for the bottom half for the feathers, and we will be hopefully getting some feather details on here. We're going to be using kind of long rectangle pieces and attaching smaller triangles on the bottom to get the fluted feathery look, and layering these in different ways so that we can get a decent shape out of this. This does take a lot of time, you know, trying to lay out individual stripes of feathers, but I figured that would be the easiest way. And the best way also is to start from the top and work your way down. So I'm starting at the mid section here, which is fine. It's actually the top section of the black coloring on the eagle, and that is going to be then covered up with the white section. So starting with this, I think, made the most sense, as it was going to save us the most time. Trying to layer things underneath is a little bit more difficult than laying things over top. So that is why we're starting with just the black area instead of the white head. And then also the white head might have also been the more complicated area, and I wanted to build my confidence with working with these feathers initially, so that, you know, as I said, confidence is also a big part of building creatively. I want to tackle something easy, build my confidence, and then also potentially use what I learn messing around with the lower section to the upper section. Now this is our beak, the beak of course being orange. The lower part of the beak we're going to color a darker orange just for more of a shadow break. It's on the lower side of the face, so it's going to be a little bit more in shadow, and that's just going to help it read from a distance. And so even though, you know, the whole beak is one color, we're going to make it a two-tone element, and that's going to help us just make the whole thing read a little bit better and work a little bit more cohesive with the rest of the build. The beak was a little complicated. It's a little bit smaller of an area than I thought it would be working with. In fact, I actually made both sides of the beak in a different manner, so they didn't really line up initially. And so I actually had to go back in and rethink how I laid this left side out compared to the right side. So that's why I'm kind of looking around a lot, looking at different angles, making sure, you know, things are lining up and making sense and reading from afar. Here is the lower beak, pretty much simple. It's like just a simple half circle connecting up to the upper area. And we will be then moving on, hopefully, to some more feathering, more white elements going on there. In fact, you can see I even put kind of the eyebrow line up above the beak initially, and that's just so I know ahead of time roughly where the eyes are going to be, and that's also going to help determine how wide the face is. More feathers at this point, just trying to finish wrapping around the whole body, and the rock formation will eventually grow, as you can see here, up around the log flume and hold up this giant kind of sculpted eagle here, and that is why this thing is called Eagle Peak. It is a pretty cool structure to have so high up. You know, I could have maybe made it out of stone. That would have been cool as well, so it looked more carved, but I think that would have been a little bit more time consuming, and it might not have read from a distance. So let's go ahead and cut to real time so you guys can see how this all turned out and come together. Alright, so here we go. This is the finished Eagle Point log flume ride. here is the wonderful little sawmill that we have here. We have a water tower for I don't know. That's in detail. I can't really explain that too well. It's there though. As they approach and come inside, you can see that we have a nice little booth here for the person running the area. We have a little bit of detail in here, not a whole lot. I didn't want to overburden the entryway. I know a lot of people really love putting those story elements into the queue and into the building itself, but I had to use a lot of our park count just with the outdoor scenery and the general feel of the little rocky mountain range that we have here. Though I did add, just plenty of little movement here just for the saw blade itself, and of course stuff to keep the logs in line. We have a water wheel powering this thing with a little bit extra gear linkage there, and some of it exposed here next to these movable parts. The train pistons helping to drive these as well. And of course our little log ramp here to get these up into the building with a little hook and tackle to help pull them into it as well. As the log flume goes up into the first little woodland area, it travels along a nice little ravine edge and then circles underneath its own wooden bridge, splashing down right so you can get a nice view of the logs being transported to the mill itself. At that point, you enter more of the main lift hill that takes you up to Eagle Point, that has our wonderfully crafted eagle atop a nice stone face. And as you come through and under the cave, you reach the first splashdown area. Actually, the second. It's really the only main splashdown area. And then you're just greeted with some nice scenery as you meander your way back over to the mill. So let's go ahead and reset this thing real quick and take this thing for a spin. And I hope you guys enjoy that little process as we go ahead and take it on a journey. Nice first-person view as you meander your way through this beautiful evening in Planet Coaster. This is why I love this game so much. The lighting engine is superb. Just the whole atmosphere that you get just going up these little hills and working your way through this canal and just hearing all the sound effects is just great. Hearing the water kind of push you along in this little log. You can see the cathedral from last episode off in the distance. Just imagine a whole sprawling park before you. And this is definitely a more centerpiece, or a piece that you can use to view many sights and sounds of your park itself. Especially if you're able to surround this mountain range with other elements that other people have made in the workshop. There are plenty of Alpine kind of themed items there by now. In fact, I'm sure there's been a log flume built similar to this already. First drop. There we go. Splash down. Get to see all the working innards of the lumber mill right there. And some of the logs floating along. As we approach the large lift hill here. You can still see, from the left and the right. You would technically have view lines elsewhere. This wouldn't be the only thing in the park. It is a partial cave. I do like to leave maybe a side open. Now that's also to allow the person playing the game to see these carts going up these hills. I think that's a kind of an important element as you reach Eagle Point up here with a super angry eagle. And a nice little church in the background. And we'll just meander our way along the cliff edge here. And I wanted to wrap along the edge just so that there's even more view lines potentials with this thing. So you can see pretty much all your park. This thing would go around and give you plenty of different angles and views. Here's the back of our eagle here. Very nice white and black color as we enter the little crack right beneath the peak into the final drop. 45 miles an hour this thing is. Quite the splashdown. And then you just kind of meander and work your way back, even though you do get one final good look at where you just came from as another log works its way down and splashes. So overall, I'm really happy with how this ride turned out. I hope you guys are as well. As always, if you guys enjoyed today's episode, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more creative goodness such as this. Go ahead and hit that like button if you guys want to see more ride skins, and download it from the workshop in the description link down below. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Planet Coaster.